When I left, I thought I was finding myself. When I came back, I found pieces of me I had forgotten. My name is Claire. This is the story of the one suitcase I could never fully close. It begins with a painting, a ticket, and a voice that slowly stopped recognizing me. If you have ever left to become someone else, this is for you. Sit with me for a while. Let me tell you how I learned what really waits for us at home. I grew up in a coastal town where the fog comes in slow and the gulls know your name. Our house sat 2 blocks from the water. Mom's name was Linda. She kept a garden of small, persistent things: lavender, rosemary, and a stubborn rose that refused to die. Dad left when I was young. I don't like to talk about it much, but it taught me 2 things: how to patch a leaking roof and how to leave when love gets hard. Mom worked at the small-town bakery for years. She brought home day-old bread and stories. Evenings smelled of yeast and lemon. I learned to draw in the back of the bakery on paper bags. Art felt like a quiet door out of our small town. By the time I was 18, I had a scholarship and a plan. I wanted to paint large canvases and hang them in cities I had only seen in books. Mom hugged me tight before the bus left. She tucked a small sketch inside my jacket. "Remember to eat," she said. "I will," I said. I meant it then. The city opened fast and wide. It filled me up and it emptied me out in turns. I rented a tiny studio, slept under a skylight, and painted nights into mornings. At first I called home. Mom's voice warmed me through static and cheap phone lines. Then I started moving faster than my own calls. Postcards replaced conversations. Short emails replaced long letters. I told myself the distance was temporary. I told myself I needed to find a name for my work. The town and Mom became safe images in my phone, not real rooms. I thought the trade was fair. Time for art, absence for success. I was wrong. Years passed like pages torn from a calendar. I had galleries, small wins, and a name that fit my canvases. I slept sometimes and painted other times. I learned to live between deadlines. Mom sent me a package once with jam and a knitted scarf. I took a photograph and posted it, but I didn't call. I thought a picture could replace a voice. At first, when she called, I answered. Then I let messages sit unread. "I miss you," she wrote in one postcard. I opened it and set it on the counter. The city taught me to be proud in new ways. It also taught me how to avoid the tender pull of home. One winter, an art critic liked my work. People asked for my story. I told them about the sea and a childhood in a small kitchen. They liked that image. It made me appear whole and brave, but behind that image, I had stopped going home. I dated a man named Jason for a year. He was kind in certain lights. He didn't ask much about my childhood. I excused myself more and more. The excuses built like walls. Then one morning, I woke to a single line of text I could not ignore. It said, "Mom's doctor called. She is forgetting things." I thought it was a mistake. I thought the city's stress could not reach my mother's small garden. I booked a ticket. I told myself it was only to check. When I arrived, Linda looked at me and smiled, as if she had been waiting a long time for a familiar song. She called me by my name. Sometimes she called me Claire. Sometimes she reached for a name she could not find. Small things changed first. She left the kettle on the stove. She misplaced her keys in the freezer. She started a sentence and finished it with a story from years ago. I tried to be patient. I learned to remind her gently. But some evenings she would ask, "Did you always live here?" And my heart folded up in ways I had never felt before. I found myself apologizing for years I had already spent. There were accusations she never meant to say. There were tears that belonged to both of us. Sometimes she would say, "When you left, I thought you'd come back with a new life. I did, I would say. I did come back. But the truth was, sometimes I came back too late for things that had been changing quietly. The doctor used gentle words. He said, mild cognitive impairment at first. We nodded like people listening to a map they did not want to read. Then the tests turned harsher. Memory slipped like tidewater around small stones. One afternoon, Mom looked at me and asked if I was her sister. I knelt to be level with her and said, "No, I'm your daughter." She smiled, and for a second the world righted. Later that week, she wandered off and missed the bus home. A neighbor found her at the coffee shop 3 blocks away, telling a stranger about a cake she once baked. I stopped sleeping through the night. I would wake and watch the small lamp beside her bed like a lighthouse. Cleaning out a drawer, I found a bundle of postcards tied with string. They were all from me, sent when I was young and left on holiday. She had kept every single one. I had thought postcards could stand in for my presence. They could not. One night she handed me a list. I thought it was groceries, but it was a list of things she wanted me to promise. A promise to visit twice a month. A promise to keep the porch light on. A promise to learn her favorite recipe. "I don't want to forget what you taught me," she said. I promised and promised. I meant each vow with my whole body. Weeks later, at a small family meeting with the doctor, we agreed on care. We switched the locks to make sure she could not wander too far. We labeled drawers. We wrote instructions. It felt like patching a leaking roof that would never stop leaking. Then the night came that changed everything. I found her in the garden, sitting among the lavender, staring at a blank patch of soil as if searching for something sown long ago. She looked at me and said, "Do you remember the scarecrow my mother made?" I did not know how to answer. My throat closed. The next morning, she could not recognize her own reflection. She asked who the woman in the mirror was. I put my hand in hers and said nothing. I stayed. Months of small care turned into a year of routines. Doctor visits were frequent. Friends visited less often. The city felt very far away. I painted little sketches while she slept and left them on the bedside table. One evening, she held my face and said, "If anything happens to me, promise that you will not be sad forever." I laughed then, a small, shocked sound, because the idea of not being sad felt impossible. A storm came one night and the power went out. We sat with candles and the radio. She reached out and took my hand as if pulling me back from a cliff. "You saved me as much as I saved you," she said. The night she could no longer find me in a photograph, words ran together and I realized how much time we had already traded away. I asked the universe for one more ordinary morning, one more breakfast where she would tell me a story and not forget the ending. Sometimes the universe is kind in small ways. Sometimes it is not. After a long fight with forgetting, Mom's health shifted in ways we could not manage at home. We moved her to a small care home, where the staff knew how to hold hands and tell stories slowly. It felt like a second goodbye, small and necessary. I spent mornings walking her to the window and naming the boats on the horizon. On good days, she sang old songs and called me by my childhood nickname. On other days, she referred to me as a neighbor or a friend. I learned to love each form she took. I started leaving little paintings at the care home, small squares of color that smelled faintly of the sea. People would stop and look at them, and sometimes the staff would tell me that a certain painting made her smile. One afternoon, while I was arranging daisies in a jar, I found a small note in Mom's handwriting tucked between the pages of an old cookbook. It read, "If you read this, and the years have been heavy, remember that light sits in small things. Make a pie, keep the kettle warm, tell someone a story." I laughed and cried at once. Her note was a map for me. I began to cook her lemon bars just as she had taught me. I found the beat of stirring and the way the oven heat felt like a Sunday. Slowly, my own life returned to a new shape. I kept painting, but I painted differently. Smaller works, quieter colors, paintings of porches and jars and hands. My shows were less frequent, and my life felt fuller. Grief did not leave me. It sat beside me like an old companion. It softened in time. One evening I walked to the seaside alone. The sky was thin and wide. I turned on my phone and read messages from old friends. I called a neighbor instead, and we spoke about nothing important for half an hour. I came home and turned the porch light on. If you have someone waiting, call them. If the call is hard, call anyway. There is no perfect way to make up for time. There is only time itself, spent honestly. My mother taught me that sometimes being present is the only miracle we need. Thank you for listening to this story. I wonder, which moment did you feel in your chest? Which line did you carry away? Tell me below. I read every comment. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share. Your support keeps these voices alive.